Welcome to the Ralph E. Johnson Jr. YouTube channel. We feature thought-provoking videos. We have compelling interviews and profound discussions about the society in which we live. First and foremost, I would like to start off by giving my condolences to Damar Hamlin's family and wishing him a speedy recovery. Damar Hamlin is a second-year safety for the Buffalo Bills, and last night he was involved in a tackle, a collision with wide receiver Tee Higgins of the Cincinnati Bengals. Both players clashed and they fell to the field. Damar Hamlin, he rose up real quickly, but then he started to wobble and he fell back on the field and he went into cardiac arrest. Now, this is the first time ever in NFL history that a player, after a collision, went into cardiac arrest after a tackle. So this is unprecedented. Our prayers go out. We definitely hope that he has a speedy recovery. And this just brings everything into perspective, that at the end of the day, it's just a game. These are human beings. They have families and people love them. And we just want the best for them. And we definitely want to value human life over sports. Last night, I was rushing home to actually watch the game. And when I cut the TV on, I noticed something strange, that it looked like the stadium was kind of empty, but at the same time, I saw people in the stands, but I didn't see any players on the field, and I didn't hear anything about any type of inclement weather or anything of that nature. And I said, something is seriously wrong. Something isn't right. So I just watched to see what would unfold, and then I read the words on the television that said, game temporarily suspended. So I said, what's going on? And then as I began to watch and watch and watch, then they said actually what happened, that during this crucial game for both teams, had a lot of playoff implications, and guys out there, they're putting everything on the line. They're making the sacrifices. They put their bodies through this vigorous training, all preparing for this moment. And he went to tackle him, and to me it looked like a routine tackle. But from what I'm understanding is that when Tee Higgins dipped his shoulder and it hit Damar Hamlin in his chest, it knocked off his heart rhythm and he went into cardiac arrest. And it just brought back so many memories of the ugly side of sports. We often see the Lombardi Trophy being raised, or we see the gold medals being handed out, and we see all these different championships, the players happy. But the ugly side of sports are the injuries and the mental illness, the stress, sometimes death, the paralysis, all of these different things these athletes endure to entertain us. Now, I know they get paid a lot of money, and rightfully so. But at the same time, there's a great risk to entertain us. And often, as what happened last night, the risk is worse than actually the reward. So we just have to put things in perspective. But it brought back a lot of memories of the ugly side of sports. And it took me all the way back to my first experience seeing the ugly side of sports. And it took me all the way back 1982. And it's sketched in my mind. I can never forget it. When Boom Boom Ray Mancini was fighting Dooku Kim, 1982, it was the lightweight championship of the world. And both men, they really wanted this. You could see by the first round, I mean, they were hitting each other viciously, and this went on through the whole fight. And come to find out, that prior to Duk Koo Kim leaving his hotel, he wrote on the lampshade, "Kill or be killed," or "kill or die." This is how much this meant to him. He was willing to put everything on the line because of the pressure. He was the champion of Asia. He came from Korea. He came to America. He was fighting for his country. He was fighting for his family. He was fighting for glory. All those different things put that type of pressure on him to write that statement, "Kill or be killed," or "kill or die." And he went in the ring with that mentality. And on the other side of the coin, Ray Boom Boom Mancini, the storyline with him was he was always fighting for the honor of his father. And it was so much pressure on him because he was like one of those people who was looked upon as an overachiever. But then once he got the championship, he was constantly questioned. So it was a lot of pressure on him to go out there to perform as well. And when they got in the ring, it was on. And back then, the fights went all the way up to the 15th round. So the fight went all the way to the 14th round. Ultimately, Duk Koo Kim, he suffered a TKO. He was knocked down. They called the fight because when he got up, just like Damar Hamlin, he was wobbly and he stumbled back to his corner, sat on a stool, and then ultimately he was carried out of the ring on a stretcher. Then later on, he passed away from the injuries. And it was so traumatic that his mom's, she committed suicide like 3 months later because she was overwhelmed with so much grief. And even the referee, a year later, he wound up committing suicide. I guess he figured that he should have stopped the fight a little earlier or whatever. Then Boom Boom Ray Mancini, he went straight into depression. See, back then during the 80s, they weren't as desensitized as we are today. Back in the 80s or back in, the later years, we just didn't have all this. We weren't used to all of this trauma and all this violence. It was going on, but it wasn't recorded. It wasn't shown. We didn't actually see it. So we actually see it today. So we don't react to it like they did or we did back in the day. And that stuck in my mind when Duk Koo Kim passed away in the ring. They started changing different rules and regulations pertaining to boxing. But it put everything into perspective that, hey, at the end of the day, it's all about human beings and the quality of life. And then another ugly part of sports that really stuck out in my mind was 8 years later, 1990, when Hank Gathers, and I'm pretty sure all of those basketball followers and all of those basketball players know exactly what I'm about to say. But in 1990, Hank Gathers was a star athlete from Loyola Marymount College. He was a high NBA prospect. And in fact, one part of his career, it might have been a year prior, that he actually led the nation in scoring and led the nation in rebounding. So this man was a phenom. And at this stage of his life, he was only 23. And like I said, everybody was looking for him to be the next big thing in the NBA. So I was in Korea at the time. I was in a hotel in Korea. I was on my way home. I did my duty in Korea. It was a stayover, so I was in Korea. And I turned on the TV and I saw the news. I saw Hank Gathers. And the first thing I saw was him dunk the ball. And I said, okay, well, that's typical Hank Gathers. That's what he does. He dunks the ball. He scores. He wins games. what's the big deal? But then as I began to follow him on the screen, he dunked the ball, then he went down the other end of the court to guard the opposing player. And then he collapsed. He collapsed, and then ultimately they carried him off the court on a stretcher, and ultimately he passed away from, I think it was an irregular heartbeat or something wrong with his heart. But the crazy thing about that was this wasn't the first time that he collapsed on the court. And there was, of course, a lot of major concern. So the doctors put him on this medicine, and they upped the medicine to, I guess, stabilize the heart. But Hank couldn't perform well. He was on the court, he was a little woozy, he just couldn't get into his full game. And you have to understand that all of his life, all he wanted to do was be a basketball player. He wanted to get his family out of the situation that they were in. He wanted to look out for all of his friends, and wealth was right around the corner. I believe Hank came from Philadelphia, star of Philadelphia, so he came up from humble beginnings, and this was his meal ticket. So he needed to perform. So whatever happened with him and the doctors, they figured out that, okay, well, let's lower the medicine, and then you could perform. And in my mind, again, putting sports over life in my mind. And I'm pretty sure that Hank really wanted to perform, and he rationalized in his mind that he can do this and still be healthy, because the reward to him was greater than the risk. So they lowered the medicine, and lo and behold, this happened. And when I look at athletes and I see how hungry they are, and I see how much they put everything on the line, how they sacrifice, the stress, the vigorous training, I can see how injuries occur. I can see how mental illness occurs because of the pressure that we as society put on them and the pressure that they put on themselves. And we oftentimes value sports over human beings. And I think that we need to bring everything into perspective, because if you're not around to enjoy the wealth, if you're not around to enjoy the accolades or the love and the glory, then what's the use of even going through all of that? Because at the end of the day, it's all about quality of life, and you have to be living in order to have quality of life. But again, we as society, I'm not saying that we shouldn't root for our team and not root for the other team and things of that nature, but I think we need to be a little bit more empathetic that these athletes are human beings, they have feelings, and we don't want to push them to the brink of doing things that's not in the best interest of themselves and their families. The third real traumatic, ugly experience that I've seen in sports, and it hits home a little bit because this was a Baltimorean, and this was in 1993. And I know everybody during that era from Baltimore know where I'm about to go with this one. And this was Reginald Lewis, homeboy, Baltimore icon when it comes to basketball. But he rose up to become a great NBA player. He was the captain of the Celtics 1993, and he was actually on the court. He was on the basketball court. Boston was playing against the Charlotte Hornets, playoff game. And of course, it was real important. And Reggie was driven dribbling the basketball down the court, and he collapsed. And it's ironic because he was playing against Muggsy Tyrone Bogues, who's a close friend of his, who played for the same iconic Baltimore Poets basketball team. Arguably, in my viewpoint, it's not even an argument, the greatest high school basketball team there ever was. And it was ironic that he was playing against his point guard, Muggsy, in this important playoff game, and he collapsed. And ultimately, he got the medical attention that he needed, and they got him off the court. Now, the aftermath of all of this was similar to the Hank Gathers situation. Reggie had an irregular heartbeat or something going on with his heart, and he had all these different doctors looking at what it could possibly be. But at that particular time, Reggie was 27 years old, and he was like in his prime. He was about to blow the whole league up, and all he has ever known was basketball. This is what he did. So definitely he wanted to go back out there and play. A lot of the doctors, a lot of the naysayers, a lot of the pundits, they say that it wasn't right for him to play. But this is what he wanted to do. This was his passion. This was his life. So he dealt with a couple of doctors. He got advice from certain doctors that, okay, if you do this, if you do that, then it's okay to play. And everybody was skeptical. I messed that word up, but everybody had their doubts that whether he should play or not. And he was practicing to get back into his basketball form. Again, you have to think, this man was 27 years old, and this is all he has ever known. And he had a family, and he had people that believed in him. And I'm pretty sure his family would prefer his health over sports. But again, the value of sports in our society, it has an impact on the people who are trying to reach their full pinnacle in the sport. It has an inner pressure as well as an inner passion. But to make a long story short, I think Reggie was practicing one day and he collapsed and passed out, and he ultimately died. And this is the ugly side of sports. And I'm pretty sure most of you out there can recall certain situations where you witness tragic events when it comes to sports. And I think that, again, the pressure, the anxiety, all leads to depression. It leads to mental illness as a whole. Of course, a lot of it leads to injury. A lot of it leads to paralysis. A lot of it leads to death. And in the case of Damar Hamlin in the National Football League, for the first time now we know it can lead to cardiac arrest. So I guess the moral of this tape is that when you see a player injured, when you see a player going through some type of mental instability, I think that we should have a lot more empathy, because we really on so many different levels don't understand the level of stress and the level of pain that they have to endure to entertain us. And yes, they do get a lot of money, but they also risk a lot to inspire us, to motivate people, to give back to the community, to boost economies in their respective cities or states. So they give back a lot as well. And I just think that we should be more supportive. And oftentimes, I even get frustrated when I see a player injured and I want that player to go out there and you get a little angry when the team loses. But at the end of the day, you have to understand it's all about these players' health. And that's what I want to get out of all of this situation with Damar Hamlin. It just brings everything into perspective, and I really thank the National Football League for stopping the game, not only for Damar Hamlin's family, the Bengals, the Buffalo Bills, but it sends a message. It sends a message that we value the human life more than we value money, more than we value glory, more than we value a Super Bowl. And that's how it should be. It should be a game of fun, a game of great possibilities, but a game. And let's keep it in their perspective as a game. Of course, there are many rewards that you can get from a game, or running around a track, or playing hockey, or water polo, or volleyball. These players are passionate about their sport. But at the end of the day, let's not drive them. Parents, when you are practicing with these kids, when you are motivating these kids, coaches, please, at the end of the day, teach these kids that the value of life, the value of mental stability, the value of health is above sports. And it should not be a kill or be killed or live or die situation. But it really should just be a win or loss thing. And after that loss or after that win, then you go into the next day. And if you lost, the next day you try to get better. If you win, the next day you try to get better. And that's how I think that we should approach sports. And it's really heart-wrenching. It's really heart-wrenching and to have this type of conversation. But I just wanted to make this tape to send that message about the ugly side of sports. And we play, the fans, we play a major part about the ugly side of sports as well, when we lose our tempers in the stands because somebody says something about a player. We want to punch somebody in the mouth, or we want to run on the field and beat the players up, or we want to jump in the ring and try to swing on Holyfield or Tyson. God forbid you try to do something crazy like that. But you have people that's that angry or put that much money on the line that they would wreak havoc. And that's the ugly side. I remember with the Ron Artest thing, when the Indiana Pacers, I think they were playing the Detroit Pistons at the time, and everybody got to fighting because of the passion of the sport. And I'm not pointing any fingers of who's right or who's wrong. All I'm saying is that when passion get involved, it has to be controlled and properly managed in a healthy way, where we can absorb losses or absorb insults and still be able to enjoy the beauty of the game. If you like the video, please subscribe to the channel so that you can continue to enjoy thought-provoking videos, compelling interviews, and profound discussions about the society in which we live. God bless.